Most people spend years trying to feel better about themselves, but they don't always know where to start. Some try to be perfect. Others pretend they don't care. Some stay busy to avoid how they really feel. But deep down, they're tired of comparing, tired of hiding, tired of waiting for a day when they'll finally feel good enough. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone, and this video is for you. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk honestly about what it really takes to accept yourself and build emotional freedom, not just for a moment, but in a way that lasts. This isn't about quick fixes or surface-level tips. This is about building a strong foundation from the inside out. If you've been carrying guilt, shame, or self-doubt for years, what you'll hear today might challenge the way you've been thinking, but it will also give you tools to finally move forward. We'll walk through how to stop being so hard on yourself, how to manage your emotions in real life, not just in theory, and how to stop letting the past define what you believe about your future. You'll learn how to create simple habits that build self-respect. You'll see why emotional freedom isn't about escaping your feelings, but learning how to face them with clarity and strength. And if you've ever felt like you're not doing enough, or like something is wrong with you for still struggling, I want you to hear this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. You've just never been taught how to take care of your inner world. Most people aren't, but it's never too late to learn. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear and practical path to begin showing up for yourself in a new way. You'll walk away with motivation you can actually use, not just words that sound good for a few minutes and then fade. This is real, it's raw, and it can change your life if you let it. So if you're ready to stop chasing self-worth and start building it from the ground up, stay with me. You're exactly where you need to be. Chapter 1. Recognize your worth and embrace your unique identity. You don't have to earn your worth. That's the truth most people never hear. From the moment you were born, you were enough. Your worth didn't depend on your achievements, the praise you received, how many people liked you, or how well you fit into the expectations of the world around you. It was already inside you, unchangeable, permanent and real. But over time, life teaches you to forget that. You begin to look outside yourself for approval. You start to measure your value based on how productive you are, how attractive you look, how much success you can display. And without noticing, you lose the ability to just be without constantly trying to prove that you're good enough. That's where everything begins to go wrong. When you forget your worth, you chase things that don't bring you peace. You try to become someone you think people will accept, and in doing that, you reject yourself. You silence your voice to avoid conflict. You criticize your reflection in the mirror. You compare your life to others and convince yourself that you're behind. None of these habits are natural, they're learned, and the first step to emotional freedom is unlearning them. Before anything in your life can truly change, you have to recognize your worth. You have to stop looking for permission to be who you are. The moment you do that, you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You begin to walk your own path, even if it's unfamiliar, because now you know that you belong to yourself, not to the opinions or expectations of others. Recognizing your worth is not about arrogance or self-importance. It's about respect. It's about seeing yourself clearly, without filters, without shame, without distortion. You don't need to pretend to be confident when you're not. You don't need to act tough when you're hurting. True self-worth allows you to be honest about who you are without fear. You can have flaws, insecurities, regrets, and still be worthy. You can have moments of weakness and still be strong. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be real. This process begins with awareness. You have to start noticing how often you criticize yourself and why. Pay attention to the language you use in your own mind. When you make a mistake, do you call yourself a failure? When someone ignores you, do you immediately assume you did something wrong? These small thoughts matter. They are like drops of water slowly carving patterns into stone. Over time, they shape your beliefs. And what you believe about yourself becomes the standard for how you allow others to treat you, how you treat yourself, and what you believe is possible for your life. To break this pattern, start with one clear action. Stop agreeing with your inner critic. That voice that tells you you're not good enough is not telling the truth. It's repeating stories from your past. Maybe someone in your childhood told you that you were a burden. Maybe you were punished for expressing your feelings. Maybe you were praised only when you succeeded. These experiences become scripts that you replay over and over until they start to feel like facts. But they're not. They're echoes of hurt, not reflections of reality. You're allowed to change the story. You're allowed to reject the lies that kept you small. And you're allowed to build new beliefs that support your growth instead of suppressing it. One powerful way to begin shifting your inner dialogue is to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you deeply care about. Imagine a child who is struggling, who feels afraid, insecure, and unsure of themselves. Would you tell them to be tougher? Would you criticize them for not being enough? Or would you remind them of their value, no matter what they're going through? That child still lives in you, and it's your job to protect them. Every time you choose kindness over criticism, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was forgotten. You rebuild trust with yourself, and slowly your self-worth becomes rooted, not in how others see you, but in how you treat yourself. It's not always easy. There will be days when you slip back into old habits. You'll hear that inner voice again, whispering doubts and judgments, but you don't have to believe it. You can acknowledge the voice without giving it power. You can remind yourself that you are no longer who you used to be. You're not defined by your past, your pain, or your mistakes. You're defined by what you choose to do now. And every time you choose self-respect, you grow stronger. There is something sacred about being real in a world that constantly tells you to be something else. The pressure to conform is everywhere. Social media shows you highlight reels of other people's lives. Advertisements tell you you're not good enough without their product. Even well-meaning friends or family might push you to follow a path that isn't yours, but emotional freedom means you stop chasing validation from people who don't understand you. It means you start building a life that reflects your truth, even if others don't approve. When you recognize your worth, you realize you don't need anyone else to approve of your journey. You just need to be honest with yourself. Your identity is not a performance. It's not a mask you wear to get praise. It's the unfiltered expression of who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. To embrace that, you have to be willing to stand alone sometimes. You have to be okay with being misunderstood. But the reward is authenticity. You no longer have to live in fear of being exposed as not enough, because you've stopped pretending to be anything other than yourself. So how do you do this in practical terms? First, start creating time for silence. When life gets noisy, you lose your connection to yourself. Start with 10 minutes a day where you sit quietly and listen to your thoughts. You don't need to judge them, just observe them. Notice which thoughts are kind and which ones are cruel. The cruel ones are not coming from your true self. They're habits you've absorbed from the world. As you practice silence, you start to hear the voice of your deeper self, the one that already knows you're worthy. That voice might be quiet at first, but it's always there, and the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. Second, write down 3 things every day that you appreciate about yourself. Not achievements or productivity, qualities. Maybe you were patient today. Maybe you stayed honest even when it was hard. Maybe you simply showed up. These are not small things. They are signs of growth. By training your mind to notice them, you begin to shift your focus from what you lack to what you have, and what you focus on expands. If you focus on your weaknesses, they grow. If you focus on your strengths, they grow. You have the power to decide which voice you feed. Third, begin to separate who you are from what you do. You are not your job, your title, your relationship status, or your income. These things can change, and they will. If your identity is built on them, you will feel lost when they shift. But if your identity is built on your values, your character, your inner compass, then you remain grounded even when life throws you into chaos. Spend time identifying what truly matters to you. Is it honesty, growth, service, peace? Let those values guide your decisions. When you live in alignment with your values, you start to feel whole. Fourth, surround yourself with people who see you clearly and treat you with respect. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Some people will try to shape you into what they want. Others will only love you when you meet their expectations. Emotional freedom means letting go of relationships that cost you your dignity. You don't need permission to walk away from people who make you feel small. You don't need to explain your worth to those who don't recognize it. Save your energy for those who lift you up, and remind you of who you are. Finally, stop waiting for the perfect moment to accept yourself. Perfection is a trap that keeps you stuck. You don't need to fix everything before you start loving yourself. You don't need to achieve more before you feel worthy. You just need to decide that you're done with the lies, that today you will choose truth over fear, that you will choose respect over shame, that you will show up for yourself, even if no one else does. This is where the real work begins, not with external change, but with internal honesty. Every time you recognize your worth, you take back control of your life. You no longer depend on other people to tell you who you are. You no longer shape your identity around their approval. You become your own anchor. You learn to trust your voice, follow your instincts, and stand tall in your truth. This is what emotional freedom feels like. It's not about being free from pain or struggle. It's about knowing that no matter what happens, you will not abandon yourself. The journey is not easy. There will be moments when you doubt everything, but you don't have to be perfect to move forward. You just have to be willing to unlearn the lies, willing to face the discomfort, willing to choose self-respect even when it feels unfamiliar. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes. Over time, recognizing your worth stops being an effort and starts being a fact. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of love. You already are. You don't need to change yourself to be accepted. You need to accept yourself to be free. This freedom is not a destination, it's a practice, and it begins with one decision: to stop waiting and start showing up for yourself today. When you do that, everything begins to change, not because the world sees you differently, but because you finally see yourself. And once you do, there's no turning back. You've remembered the truth, and now nothing can take that away from you. Chapter 2. Challenge negative thoughts and replace them with truth. Negative thoughts are not simply passing moments of doubt. They are mental habits that form over time and begin to shape how we see ourselves and the world around us. They influence how we interpret what happens in our day, how we relate to others, and most importantly, how we relate to ourselves. When a negative thought takes root, it can distort reality and convince us of things that aren't true. It can whisper that we're not good enough, that we'll never change, that we're falling behind, or that we don't deserve happiness. The longer we allow these thoughts to go unchallenged, the more they become part of our internal script. But thoughts are not facts. They are only reflections of patterns, experiences, and beliefs that have been learned over time. Just as they've been formed, they can be questioned, challenged, and reshaped. Every person has moments of self-doubt or worry. That's part of being human. But the danger lies in letting those moments define who we are. What creates freedom is the ability to recognize a negative thought for what it is and refuse to give it the power to decide our worth or dictate our direction. This work starts in silence, not with shouting affirmations into the mirror, but with noticing the quiet narratives playing in the background. It might be a constant feeling of falling short. It might be a voice that always points out flaws but never strengths. It might be an automatic assumption that when something goes wrong, it's because of some personal failure. These thoughts might have been there so long they feel like truth, but they are merely assumptions dressed in familiarity. Begin by watching your thoughts without reacting. Observe when your mind begins to spiral or when you start to shrink in the presence of a challenge. Pay attention to the words you use in your mind when you make a mistake or face discomfort. This is not about judgment, but awareness. The thoughts you discover may surprise you. Some will sound crueler than you'd ever speak to someone else. That realization alone should be a signal. If it's not something you'd say to someone you love, then it's not something you should say to yourself. The next step is to stop agreeing with those thoughts. You don't have to argue with them emotionally or try to bury them under artificial positivity. You can simply examine them with logic. When the mind says, "I'm not good enough," ask, what does that even mean? Who told me that? Is that always true, or have I just decided to believe it? This process doesn't require drama. It requires discipline. Challenge the thought as if you were solving a problem or testing a theory. Question it until it loses its grip. Truth is quieter than fear. It won't shout or demand your attention, but it is always there, steady, patient, clear. The truth is that you are not your worst moment. You are not defined by your failures. You are not bound to repeat your past. The truth is that your value doesn't depend on your productivity, your appearance, your past mistakes, or anyone else's approval. The truth is that growth is messy, and progress is rarely a straight line. The truth is that you're still here, and that means there's more to do, more to become, more to offer. Replacing negative thoughts doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means replacing distortion with accuracy. It means that instead of thinking, "I always ruin everything," you remind yourself, "I've made mistakes, but I've also made progress." Instead of thinking, "No one cares about me," you remind yourself, "There are people who care. Maybe I've overlooked them because I was focused on the ones who didn't." This isn't delusion. This is seeing the full picture instead of only the dark corner. Every time you interrupt a negative thought, you weaken its influence. The first time you do it, it may feel strange or even dishonest, but the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. And over time, the space that was once filled with criticism starts to fill with clarity. You become less reactive, more grounded. You stop fearing every mistake as a reflection of your worth. You begin to respond to difficulty with curiosity instead of shame. Real change begins with one thought at a time, not with changing who you are, but with changing how you speak to yourself. If you find yourself thinking, "I can't do this," pause and replace it with, "I may not know how yet, but I can learn." If you hear, "They're better than me," try, "They're further along in their journey, and I have my own path." If your mind says, "I'm not lovable," say, "I may have been hurt, but that doesn't make me unworthy of love." These small replacements might not feel powerful at first, but they build a new inner language, and this language becomes the foundation for your emotional freedom. When you start believing that you are capable, that you have options, that you are allowed to grow at your own pace, the fear begins to dissolve. Confidence doesn't come from perfection, it comes from the refusal to abandon yourself, especially in moments when it's easiest to. There will still be hard days. There will still be moments where your old thoughts try to return, but now you're equipped with something different. You have awareness, you have the ability to stop, to challenge, to replace, and more than anything, you have the responsibility to protect your mental environment. That responsibility isn't a burden, it's a gift, because no one else can do it for you, and no one else gets to define you. The process of challenging negative thoughts isn't about chasing happiness, it's about choosing peace over chaos. It's about choosing truth over distortion. It's about no longer allowing the shadows of past experiences to speak louder than your present strength. You were not born with self-doubt, it was taught to you, and now you have the power to unlearn it. That is the path to emotional freedom, not in denying pain or pretending to be invincible, but in standing tall in the face of doubt and deciding to think something better. This work takes time, but it changes everything. The way you walk into a room, the way you try again after failing, the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. It becomes your foundation, your guide, your strength. You don't need to control every thought. You just need to choose not to surrender to the ones that try to limit you. You're not here to shrink, you're here to become. And that begins the moment you stop believing the lies in your head and start replacing them with truth. Chapter 3. Practice daily self-compassion to heal emotional wounds. Emotional wounds are often invisible but deeply felt. They affect how you view yourself, how you handle stress, how you relate to others, and how you respond to life's challenges. These wounds are usually caused by rejection, loss, failure, betrayal, or prolonged self-criticism. The pain lingers because it was never fully processed or understood. Most people try to move past emotional pain by ignoring it, distracting themselves, or pushing forward without pausing to acknowledge what's broken inside. But healing cannot happen through avoidance. It only begins when you meet yourself where you are, with patience and kindness. Daily self-compassion is not a luxury, it is a necessary discipline for anyone who wants to grow emotionally. It's the practice of treating yourself with the same care and understanding you would offer to someone else who's hurting. It's not about giving up or feeling sorry for yourself. It's about showing up for yourself without judgment. It means allowing yourself to feel what you feel without rushing to fix or suppress it. You don't heal by forcing pain to disappear. You heal by making space for it without shame. Most people were never taught how to be gentle with themselves. In many environments, being hard on yourself is mistaken for being strong. Many have learned to motivate themselves through self-criticism, believing that being tough will keep them focused. But what often happens is the opposite. Harshness breaks the spirit. It doesn't build resilience. It breeds fear, hesitation, and chronic self-doubt. When you constantly criticize yourself for not being enough, you stop trusting yourself. You become your own enemy. Daily self-compassion means giving yourself permission to be human. That means you are allowed to make mistakes, to feel tired, to be uncertain, to have bad days. It means recognizing that you are not broken. You are learning. You are allowed to be in progress. You don't need to earn your right to rest. You don't need to prove your worth to be deserving of understanding. You are not weak for needing care. You are wise for recognizing it. Practicing self-compassion daily involves more than thoughts. It's something you must act on. It begins with small choices. You pause when you feel overwhelmed. You speak to yourself calmly when you fall short. You take time to do something that nourishes you, even if it seems small. You stop comparing your pace to someone else's. You remind yourself that growth isn't about speed, it's about direction. These moments may seem ordinary, but they slowly rebuild what emotional pain has damaged. They teach your mind that you are safe with yourself, even when life feels unstable. Self-compassion also means listening to what you need instead of what you expect. Many emotional wounds stay open because people keep demanding performance from themselves when what they really need is patience. You might be grieving and still trying to keep up with old routines. You might be burned out but still pretending you're fine. You might be deeply disappointed but trying to stay cheerful for others. Self-compassion asks you to stop pretending and start being honest about where you are. It allows you to admit when you're struggling and reminds you that you're allowed to slow down without losing your value. Sometimes, emotional wounds are deep because of what was never said. Maybe no one apologized. Maybe no one explained. Maybe no one gave you closure. Self-compassion helps you understand that waiting for someone else to heal you will keep you stuck. The healing you need begins within you. It begins when you validate your own pain, when you stop needing permission to move forward, and when you recognize that your emotions are valid even if others never acknowledge them. Self-compassion becomes the closure you never received. It becomes the peace that others couldn't give. To build a habit of self-compassion, create a routine that reminds you of your worth. You don't have to make grand gestures. Start with 5 minutes in the morning where you check in with yourself instead of your phone. Ask yourself how you're really feeling. Write it down if needed. Name your emotions clearly. Then speak back with support, not shame. Affirm what is true and helpful. Say things like, "I'm doing the best I can today," or "It's okay to take a break." Your mind believes what it hears often. The more you speak kindly to yourself, the more your inner environment begins to shift. Create space in your day for emotional reset. That could be a walk alone, a quiet moment without stimulation, or simply closing your eyes and breathing with intention. In those moments, don't try to figure everything out. Focus only on creating calm. Your nervous system needs rest to process pain. Silence and stillness aren't distractions, they are medicine. Make time for things that bring comfort, not escape. That might be music, journaling, deep conversation, or solitude. Listen to what restores you, and do it often. Be mindful of the words you use when speaking about yourself. If you constantly call yourself lazy, stupid, or a failure, your brain internalizes that language. You start to operate from that identity. Instead, use words that reflect progress, not punishment. Instead of, "I always mess things up," say, "I'm still learning how to manage this." Instead of, "I can't handle this," try, "I'm feeling overwhelmed, but I'll take it one step at a time." You are not lying to yourself. You're choosing to speak from hope, not despair. Some emotional wounds are tied to past events that still carry emotional weight. Self-compassion means giving yourself the grace to feel those emotions without rushing them away. You may still feel anger from what happened years ago. You may still carry guilt or regret. You may still mourn opportunities lost. These feelings don't mean you're weak. They mean you're still carrying something meaningful. By sitting with these emotions without self-judgment, you allow them to surface and release. Suppressing pain prolongs suffering. Acknowledging it gently helps it soften. When practicing self-compassion, Don't expect perfection. You will still have days where you slip into old habits. You will still hear the voice of doubt. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means the process is working. Every time you return to compassion, even after falling into criticism, you strengthen your emotional resilience. Over time, those moments of kindness become instinctive. They become the default instead of the exception. Self-compassion also improves your relationships. When you're gentle with yourself, you stop expecting others to carry your emotional load. You no longer demand perfection from them because you've stopped demanding it from yourself. You stop reacting out of fear, and you start communicating with clarity. You allow people to be human, just as you've allowed yourself to be. And that kind of grace builds connection, not control. Emotional wounds often leave behind a sense of emptiness. Self-compassion fills that space with presence, not with distraction, not with false positivity, but with real acceptance. You stop fighting who you are. You stop blaming yourself for being sensitive or different. You stop trying to meet impossible standards. Instead, you meet yourself with respect. You become a source of peace instead of pressure. Healing doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from understanding deeper. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about being able to return to yourself with honesty and warmth no matter what you've been through. Daily self-compassion builds that return. It teaches you that you are never alone because you are there for yourself. That's where strength begins, not in being perfect, but in being kind, not just once, but every single day. Chapter 4. Set healthy boundaries to protect your emotional energy. There comes a point in every person's life when they realize that not everyone deserves access to their time, energy, or attention. Not because others are bad, but because your emotional well-being is limited, and it must be managed wisely. Learning to set healthy boundaries is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect. It means knowing where you end and others begin. It means choosing what you will allow into your space and what you will no longer tolerate, not out of anger, but out of self-awareness. Boundaries are not barriers. They don't exist to push people away or build emotional walls. They exist to protect what's sacred within you. Your peace, your focus, your energy, your values. These things matter. And when you allow others to repeatedly cross the line without consequence, you begin to lose touch with those parts of yourself. Over time, your identity gets shaped by what others expect from you instead of who you really are. You start saying yes when you mean no. You carry guilt that isn't yours. You give and give, hoping to keep the peace while slowly draining your own spirit. One of the reasons boundaries are difficult to set is because many people confuse kindness with self-abandonment. You were taught to be agreeable, polite, generous, but that training never came with an instruction manual on how to protect yourself. You learned to make others comfortable at your own expense. You tolerated things that made you anxious or exhausted, just to avoid being called selfish or difficult. But the truth is, neglecting your own emotional needs isn't kindness, it's silent self-destruction. Setting boundaries begins with clarity. You need to know what your values are, what your limits are, and what behaviors you will no longer accept. If you've never asked yourself those questions, start now. What drains you? What makes you feel used, unsafe, or disrespected? Who do you feel anxious around and why? Pay attention to what your body tells you. Tension, fatigue, or resentment are signs that a boundary is being ignored. When something feels off repeatedly, that's your signal, not your imagination. Boundaries also require honest communication. That means you will need to speak directly without guilt. You don't need to justify your limits to people who benefit from your lack of them. You are not required to over-explain your choices or convince someone of your worth. A simple statement like, "I'm not available for that," or "that doesn't work for me," is enough. Being assertive does not make you aggressive. Being clear is not rude. The discomfort you may feel while setting a boundary is temporary. The freedom that follows is lasting. It's important to expect resistance. When you begin to protect your energy, the people who were comfortable overstepping will notice. They may push back. They may call you cold, distant, or difficult. That is not a reflection of your wrongness. It's a reflection of how they benefited from your silence. Don't let guilt trick you into shrinking again. You are not obligated to exhaust yourself for people who refuse to meet you with respect. If a relationship cannot survive your honesty, it wasn't a healthy relationship to begin with. Boundaries are also necessary within your inner life. You must guard your emotional energy, not just from others, but from your own habits of overthinking, people-pleasing, and self-criticism. If you constantly replay conversations in your mind, trying to imagine how you could have done things differently, you are wasting emotional resources on what cannot be changed. If you habitually say yes to things you don't want to do, just to avoid the discomfort of saying no, you are trading short-term peace for long-term resentment. Emotional energy is not infinite. Protect it with awareness. Part of maintaining boundaries is learning how to walk away from situations that no longer serve you. This takes courage. Sometimes emotional ties keep you connected to people who drain you. Sometimes shared history makes it harder to admit that a friendship or partnership is no longer mutual. But longevity is not proof of value. A long relationship that costs you your mental health is not worth preserving. Ending a connection doesn't mean you failed. It means you've grown. Another layer of boundaries is knowing when to say no without guilt. Saying no is a skill that gets stronger with practice. You're not responsible for how others react to your no. Your role is not to carry their disappointment. Your role is to stay rooted in what is right for you. Every time you say no to something that drains you, you are saying yes to something that restores you. Boundaries create room for what really matters: your peace, your growth, your healing. You don't owe access to everyone. Just because someone is family, or from your past, or in your workplace, doesn't mean they have a right to your emotional openness. You decide who earns a place in your life. You decide what kind of behavior is acceptable. And when someone repeatedly violates your boundaries, you are allowed to remove them from your inner circle. Forgiveness does not require continued access. You can wish someone well and still move on. Boundaries also need to be maintained, not just declared. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a consistent practice of showing up for yourself. That might mean not answering messages during your rest time. That might mean ending conversations that turn toxic. That might mean choosing not to engage in drama, gossip, or emotional manipulation. Every boundary you enforce teaches people how to treat you. More importantly, it teaches you how to value yourself. As you strengthen your boundaries, you will start to notice shifts. You'll feel less drained after social interactions. You'll sleep better. You'll feel more grounded in your decisions. You'll stop seeking approval for doing what's best for you. That's the reward for doing the hard work. Boundaries don't create distance. They create dignity. They make your relationships healthier. They make your time more intentional. They make your life more your own. To protect your emotional energy, you must live with intention. Not everything deserves a reaction. Not every conflict needs your involvement. Not every request deserves a yes. Choose your battles and choose your peace more often. You don't need to fix everything for everyone. You don't need to absorb the emotions of people who refuse to manage their own. You are not responsible for the emotional chaos of others. You will meet people who honor your boundaries and people who challenge them. Learn to notice the difference. A healthy person will respect your space and your voice. A controlling person will see your boundary as a threat. Stand firm anyway. Your emotional well-being is not negotiable. The more you prioritize it, the more stable you become, and in that stability, you find clarity, strength, and freedom. Healthy boundaries don't make you hard. They make you whole. They don't isolate you. They protect what's sacred. The people who truly love and respect you will not be offended by your limits. They will be grateful for your honesty, and as you continue to build a life where your emotional energy is honored, you will experience less chaos and more calm. You will no longer feel like you're constantly recovering from life. Instead, you will feel aligned with it. Boundaries make that possible. They are not selfish. They are self-respect in action. Chapter 5. Develop mindfulness habits to stay present and grounded. Life constantly pulls your attention in every direction, and most of the time, you don't even notice it happening. Your thoughts drift to yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's worries. Your energy gets tangled in what-ifs, regrets, and imaginary outcomes that haven't even happened. Slowly, the present moment, the only moment that truly exists, gets buried beneath a mountain of distractions. And when the present is neglected, you begin to feel ungrounded, scattered, and emotionally unstable. The solution isn't to control everything around you, it's to learn how to stay connected to what's right in front of you. That's where mindfulness becomes essential, not as a technique to escape life, but as a habit to fully live it. You don't need hours of meditation or spiritual rituals to be mindful. It's not about sitting in silence for long stretches or mastering ancient practices. Mindfulness starts with small choices, repeated with intention. It begins when you decide to notice your breath, rather than rush through your day. It grows when you take a moment to feel your feet on the floor, instead of letting your mind race ahead. Every time you bring your awareness back to what you're doing, you're training your mind to stop reacting and start observing. And in that space between reaction and response, peace becomes possible. Being mindful doesn't mean you have to get everything right. It means you're willing to observe without judgment. Most of the stress you carry is amplified by your own inner commentary, thinking you should be better, faster, smarter, more productive. But when you step into the present with gentleness, you begin to release the pressure to perform. You start listening to your body instead of overriding it. You pay attention to how food tastes, how the wind feels, how a conversation makes you feel. Suddenly the ordinary moments you used to overlook become rich with clarity. Mindfulness isn't a distant goal. It's not something you arrive at once you've fixed yourself. In fact, mindfulness is the very tool that helps you heal in the first place. When your attention stays grounded in what is, rather than what was, or what might be, your nervous system relaxes. You stop reliving old pain. You stop predicting disaster. You begin to inhabit your own life again. You become more aware of your reactions, your habits, your choices, and from that awareness, new possibilities emerge, ones that weren't visible when you were stuck in autopilot. Start small. Begin your morning with a few slow breaths before you touch your phone or engage with the world. Notice how your body feels. Are your shoulders tense? Is your jaw tight? Can you soften your hands or stretch for just 1 minute before the day sweeps you away? Those moments might seem insignificant, but they build your inner foundation. When practiced regularly, they create a sense of inner safety that external circumstances can't shake. You begin to carry stillness with you, no matter what chaos is happening around you. Throughout your day, pause and check in with yourself. When you feel irritation rising, take one conscious breath before speaking. When your thoughts begin to spiral, gently bring your attention back to your surroundings. What do you see, hear, feel, or smell right now? This kind of awareness doesn't take away your problems, but it keeps your nervous system from being hijacked by fear or overwhelm. You stay centered instead of scattered. You remain aware instead of reactive. That's the quiet power of mindfulness. It brings you back to yourself. Mindfulness also teaches you to slow down, not in pace but in attention. You might still move quickly through your responsibilities, but you don't have to rush mentally. You don't have to be 2 steps ahead of everything. When you eat, actually taste your food. When you listen, truly hear the words being said. When you walk, feel the ground beneath your feet. These moments of grounded presence accumulate. They create a stronger sense of connection between your mind and body. And when mind and body work in harmony, stress loses its grip on you. Don't wait for a perfect environment to practice. You don't need silence or a retreat. In fact, some of the most profound mindfulness happens in the messiness of life during arguments, while doing chores when stuck in traffic, or overwhelmed by responsibility. Those are the moments that matter. That's where you learn how to pause instead of panic, how to feel instead of suppress, how to breathe instead of react. With time, mindfulness becomes your baseline. You no longer live from a place of tension and anticipation, but from a quiet awareness that knows how to be present without needing to control everything. Mindfulness doesn't require perfection. Some days you'll be distracted. Some moments you'll get pulled back into old patterns. That's okay. The goal is not to never get lost, but to find your way back sooner. Each time you return your attention to the present, you strengthen your emotional balance. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, you reinforce inner calm. It's a practice, not a performance. And like any habit, it grows with consistency. With mindfulness, you also develop compassion for yourself. You begin to notice your inner dialogue and realize how harsh it has been. You start to treat your own emotions with the same patience you might offer a child or a friend. You stop shaming yourself for struggling and instead ask, what do I need right now? That simple question can shift everything. It brings you back to the now, where real healing happens, because you can't change the past, and the future isn't guaranteed. But in this moment, you can choose to meet yourself with care. Over time, mindfulness becomes more than just a habit. It becomes your way of living. You don't need to force it. It becomes natural to slow down before reacting, to notice before judging, to breathe before rushing. You create space inside yourself, and in that space, you find clarity. You no longer feel like life is happening to you. You feel engaged in it, responsible for how you move through it. Even in the hardest times, you find a place within you that remains steady, untouched by external noise. When you live mindfully, life becomes less about control and more about connection. You begin to understand that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. And the more present you become, the more you realize that you already have what you were seeking. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to predict every outcome. You simply have to show up to this moment with your full presence and trust that it's enough. Mindfulness won't make life perfect, but it will make you more resilient. It will help you respond with clarity instead of fear. It will guide you back to yourself when the world feels overwhelming. And in that returning, you'll discover that you are never truly lost. You are just one breath away from coming home to the present, one breath away from grounding yourself, one breath away from remembering who you really are, one breath away from remembering who you really are. Chapter 6. Release past pain by forgiving yourself and others. Holding on to pain from the past is like dragging a heavy chain everywhere you go. It affects how you speak, how you think, how you trust, and how you show up in relationships. Often you're not even aware of how much it weighs you down because it's been with you for so long. But underneath the habits, defenses, and distance is a wound that hasn't been given the chance to heal. Forgiveness is not about pretending it didn't happen. It's not about excusing harm or forgetting how deeply you were hurt. Forgiveness is about choosing not to carry the burden anymore. It's a personal decision to stop letting the past control your peace. Some of the pain you hold was caused by others, people who betrayed your trust, ignored your needs, or left when you needed them most. And some of it, painfully, was caused by you, decisions you regret, words you wish you could take back, versions of yourself you've outgrown. But whether the pain came from outside or inside, it lingers when you keep reliving it. You play the memory over and over in your mind, hoping it will somehow change, but all it does is deepen the suffering. Forgiveness interrupts that cycle. It gives you a way to put the memory down without denying it happened and reclaim the space in your heart that it's been occupying. You don't need to wait until someone apologizes. You don't need anyone's permission. Forgiveness begins when you decide you want peace more than you want revenge, resolution, or recognition. That doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you no longer want to hand your present joy over to a moment that's already gone. It means you're done letting someone else's behavior define how you feel about yourself. You recognize that healing isn't about the other person, it's about restoring your own emotional freedom. And when it comes to forgiving yourself, the process can be even harder. You may hold yourself to impossible standards, thinking that if you suffer enough, you'll make up for the past. But shame doesn't fix what went wrong. It only keeps you stuck in the same story, punishing yourself instead of learning from it. Forgiving yourself is not about denying responsibility. It's about facing your past with honesty and choosing to respond with compassion. You can acknowledge your mistakes without collapsing into self-hate. You can learn from your choices without defining your worth by them. Maybe you stayed too long in something that hurt you. Maybe you lashed out when you should have stayed calm. Maybe you abandoned someone or yourself when it mattered most. Those truths are hard to face, but they don't have to destroy you. If you can admit them with sincerity, you can begin to let them go. You can say, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And if that doesn't feel true yet, you can say, I'm learning to treat myself with more understanding. Healing begins with that small willingness to stop fighting yourself. There's a part of you that still remembers how things felt in the moment. The betrayal, the failure, the heartbreak. Your body holds on to those emotions, and your mind repeats the story, reinforcing the pain. But if you can sit with that pain without feeding it more judgment, it will begin to soften. You don't need to force forgiveness. You just need to create the space where it can arise naturally. That space is built through reflection, patience, and a deep commitment to your own well-being. Think about the energy it takes to stay angry. Think about the moments you miss because your mind is stuck in resentment. That energy could be used to rebuild your life, reconnect with yourself, and nurture the peace you deserve. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's one of the most powerful choices you can make. It requires strength to feel pain, face it directly, and still choose to let go. It requires courage to free yourself from the identity of the wounded one and become someone whole again. Some people won't understand your choice to forgive. They might think you're letting others off the hook, but you're not doing this for them. You're doing it because you want your life back. You want to stop reacting to old injuries. You want to feel joy without guilt, hope without fear, and love without suspicion. Forgiveness clears the path so that those feelings can return. It makes room for new experiences that aren't shaped by the past. It reminds you that you are more than what hurt you. Even when you think you've let go, pain might rise again. That doesn't mean you've failed. Forgiveness is not a one-time decision. It's a process. Some wounds go deep, and they take time to heal. When the old anger resurfaces, return to your intention. Remind yourself why you chose to release it. Breathe through it. Allow yourself to feel it without being consumed by it. Over time, the grip loosens. What once felt like a permanent scar becomes a lesson, and what once held power over you becomes a memory that no longer defines your worth. You may never get closure in the way you want it. The person who hurt you may never change, never apologize, never even understand. Waiting for them to make things right only keeps you stuck. Instead, you can choose to make peace with the past by how you treat yourself now. You can create your own closure by deciding what you'll carry and what you'll leave behind. You get to decide what story you live by, not the one where you were abandoned, betrayed, or punished, but the one where you chose to heal, to rise, and to move forward with grace. You are not what happened to you. You are not the mistakes you made. You are not the pain you inherited. You are someone capable of turning wounds into wisdom, of turning shame into strength. And forgiveness is the gateway to that transformation. It's not easy, but it's possible. And every time you release a piece of that old pain, you make more space for joy, for growth, for connection. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to feel lighter, freer, more alive. This isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about deciding that you're ready to stop living under the shadow of what hurt you. It's about giving yourself the gift of emotional freedom. You've carried the past long enough. It's time to put it down, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. Let yourself breathe without the weight. Let yourself rest without the guilt. Let yourself begin again, not because the past is erased, but because you've finally made peace with it. Chapter 7. Build resilience through small, consistent daily improvements. Real strength doesn't appear all at once. It's not something you wake up with one morning after reading the right book or hearing the perfect advice. Real strength is something you build when you decide not to quit, especially on the days when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when progress feels slow and invisible. The truth is, resilience isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, deliberate actions that accumulate over time until what once seemed difficult becomes something you can carry with steadiness. That's how you build the inner foundation that keeps you upright through change, pressure, loss, and uncertainty. You don't have to do everything today. You don't even have to do everything well, but you do have to show up. You do have to make that one small choice that moves you a step forward. Maybe it's making your bed when you don't feel like it. Maybe it's preparing a healthier meal instead of reaching for what's easiest. Maybe it's turning off the television and taking 10 minutes to reflect. These small decisions may feel insignificant in the moment, but each one becomes part of something bigger. Each one whispers to your mind, "I can do this," and that quiet confidence begins to replace doubt. Consistency builds trust, not just with other people, but with yourself. If you promise yourself something and keep it, you begin to believe in your own word again. You begin to see yourself not as someone who breaks down under pressure, but as someone who stays steady. That doesn't mean you don't feel overwhelmed. It doesn't mean you're immune to fear or fatigue. It just means that no matter what happens, you've practiced the habit of moving forward, even when it's hard. Some days growth looks like getting up and trying again. Some days it looks like resting so you can return stronger. Either way, you're building endurance, not the kind that ignores pain or denies struggle, but the kind that knows healing doesn't come all at once. It's earned through your willingness to take care of what's within your control. You can't change everything overnight, but you can change how you respond. You can train yourself to get back up faster. You can develop the discipline to protect your peace, even when the world is chaotic. There's something powerful in realizing that your daily habits shape your future more than any single breakthrough ever will. You don't need to wait for motivation. Motivation is unpredictable, but discipline is something you can build, even in the absence of excitement. When you act with intention, despite your mood, you're rewiring your brain, you're teaching it that effort matters. You're no longer waiting for the right conditions, you're creating them. Some people think resilience is about never falling, but that's a myth. Everyone stumbles. Everyone has days when they feel discouraged or lost. What separates those who grow from those who stay stuck is the ability to respond rather than react, to breathe instead of panic, to reflect instead of retreat. Those abilities are born from small daily choices. When you take time to care for your mental, emotional, and physical health, even in small ways, you are expanding your capacity to handle life's pressure without crumbling under it. Improvement doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Waking up 10 minutes earlier and using that time to ground yourself in silence can change the way your whole day feels. Writing one sentence about what you're grateful for can help shift your mindset toward hope. Stretching your body for 5 minutes in the morning can help release the stress you've been holding. These aren't overwhelming tasks, but they require presence, they require intention, and they begin to restore your sense of power in a world that often feels chaotic. When you keep showing up for yourself in small ways, you begin to change how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who always needs to be rescued or fixed. You start realizing that you have more agency than you thought. You start trusting that you can make good decisions, even when things feel uncertain. And that internal shift is where real resilience lives. It's not in pretending to be strong, it's in knowing that strength is something you've built through effort, reflection, and care. There's a calm that comes from knowing you're doing your best, not someone else's best, but your own. You're not trying to live up to impossible standards. You're not chasing perfection. You're just getting better at facing life with grace, grit, and a growing sense of stability. That's what happens when you commit to steady improvement. Life still throws challenges at you, but you don't collapse under them. You've trained yourself to breathe through discomfort, to slow down and respond rather than panic and react. The people who appear grounded in tough times aren't lucky, they're practiced. They've made thousands of small choices that reinforce stability. They've paid attention to what makes them feel whole and what drains them. They've edited their routines, not because someone told them to, but because they noticed the difference when they did. And the beautiful thing is, anyone can begin that process at any time. It doesn't matter how far behind you feel. It only matters that you begin today with one action you're willing to repeat tomorrow. Progress doesn't mean everything changes at once. Progress means today looks slightly different than yesterday, not because you forced it, but because you showed up with care. Maybe your thoughts are a little kinder, maybe your reactions are a little slower, maybe your choices are a little more aligned with who you want to become. These shifts may not be visible to others right away, but you'll feel them, and over time the people around you will feel them too. You'll start to notice that you don't break as easily under stress, that your inner voice is more patient, that you recover more quickly when something goes wrong. These are the signs that resilience is taking root. It's not about being perfect, it's about being grounded, adaptable, and self-aware. And the only way to get there is through steady repetition, not dramatic overhauls, just simple acts done with purpose. You don't have to rush the process. You don't have to impress anyone. Your life is not a performance, it's a path, and each step you take with intention makes the path clearer. Keep choosing the small actions that nurture you. Keep building your strength, not with force but with consistency. Keep moving even when the progress feels invisible, because it's not. Every effort counts, every choice matters, and every time you show up for yourself, you are becoming the kind of person who can thrive no matter what life brings. Chapter 8. Cultivate gratitude to shift focus toward positive growth. Gratitude doesn't require perfection. It doesn't demand that your life be free from hardship or disappointment. It simply asks that you pause, even for a few moments, and notice what is still working. It's not about pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. It's about choosing to give space to what is good, even when it feels like everything else is pulling you in the opposite direction. When you begin to focus on what you appreciate, no matter how small, you shift your emotional center from lack to fullness. This doesn't erase pain, but it places it in a wider perspective. It gives your mind and heart something steady to hold on to. It's easy to fall into the habit of measuring life by what's missing, what hasn't happened, what didn't go right, who didn't show up. That mindset feeds discouragement, makes each day feel like a battle, and builds resentment where hope could be growing. Gratitude breaks that cycle. It stops the mental spiral that convinces you nothing is enough. When you intentionally look for what brings comfort, peace, or even the slightest bit of joy, you begin to retrain your focus, and what you focus on most often becomes the lens through which you experience life. Sometimes gratitude is found in the quiet moments, the sound of your own breath as you sit still, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the feeling of a hot cup of tea in your hands. These aren't grand, dramatic events, but they are real. They remind you that life still holds softness, that even in the middle of grief or stress, there are gentle details offering you a reason to exhale, and the more you notice them, the more they begin to multiply. That's the quiet power of gratitude. It teaches you to see clearly, not with idealism, but with honesty. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean ignoring your problems. It means recognizing that they are not the whole story. Even in the middle of difficulty, there are still people who care, experiences that nourish, and lessons that build strength. When you give those things attention, they start to support you. You begin to rely less on outside validation and more on your inner sense of enoughness. You start to feel more grounded in who you are, rather than constantly chasing what you don't yet have. You may not be able to control every event that happens to you, but you can choose what kind of mental environment you build for yourself each day. That environment can either be filled with criticism, regret, and frustration, or it can be shaped with appreciation, perspective, and hope. The difference doesn't lie in your circumstances, but in your attention. And attention is something you can train. You can learn to pause before reacting. You can learn to reflect before judging. And in those moments of pause, you give yourself the chance to choose gratitude instead of resentment. Growth becomes more natural when gratitude is part of your foundation. Instead of feeling like you're always climbing uphill, you start noticing how far you've already come. You start respecting your own efforts, even if no one else sees them. You start seeing setbacks not as failures, but as part of the process that's refining your character. And that mindset is what allows you to keep going without burning out. You're no longer fueled by fear or frustration. You're moved by appreciation for every bit of progress, no matter how small. It doesn't take long to begin. A few minutes a day spent reflecting on what went right, what felt good, who showed you kindness, what you accomplished, can shift the emotional tone of your entire day. You don't need to write paragraphs. You don't need the perfect journal. You just need to stop and notice. Maybe today it's that your body allowed you to move without pain. Maybe it's that a stranger smiled at you when you felt invisible. Maybe it's that you kept a promise to yourself. These moments matter. They deserve your attention. Gratitude also has the ability to soften your relationships. When you start noticing what others do well instead of what they lack, your attitude shifts. Instead of being driven by disappointment or unmet expectations, you find yourself feeling more compassion, more patience, more connection. You speak with more warmth. You forgive more quickly, not because you're ignoring boundaries or tolerating hurtful behavior, but because your focus has expanded. You begin to see people not only through the lens of what they get wrong, but through the lens of their humanity. As you grow in this practice, you'll begin to notice that your nervous system feels more stable. You'll begin to experience more emotional steadiness. Gratitude regulates your perspective. It creates space between thought and reaction. It helps you respond to challenges with a wider view. It gives your body a break from being in constant defense mode. And that physiological shift matters. It means less stress, more energy, and better sleep. It means clearer thinking and calmer decision-making. It's not just an emotional tool. It's a form of healing. When life feels overwhelming, gratitude can be a gentle anchor. You don't have to solve every problem to find relief. You just have to notice what's holding you up right now, what hasn't fallen apart, who you can lean on, What parts of you are still working, still learning, still trying? Those realizations don't erase the weight you carry, but they do make it easier to bear. You begin to feel less alone, more capable, more whole. This shift in awareness creates a cycle of growth. As you see more to be grateful for, you act with more intention. As you act with more intention, your life becomes more aligned with what truly matters. And as your life becomes more aligned, gratitude flows even more easily. You begin to trust your path more. You begin to resist less. You begin to open up to possibility again, not because everything is perfect, but because you've learned to find value in imperfection. There is no right way to be grateful. There is only your way. Some people write, some speak aloud, some pause in silence, some send messages to loved ones. The method doesn't matter. What matters is the willingness to stop long enough to notice. What matters is the decision to shift your gaze from what's missing to what's meaningful. That choice, repeated daily, changes everything. You begin to live with more awareness, more joy, more clarity. You stop needing external validation because you've built internal appreciation. You stop seeking happiness only in the future because you've found moments of contentment now. That doesn't mean you won't have days of frustration or sadness. It just means those emotions don't control you. They pass through, but they don't take root. Gratitude doesn't make your life easier. It makes your heart stronger. It reminds you that beauty exists even in broken places. It shows you that peace is not something you find once and keep forever. It's something you return to again and again, every time you choose to see what's still good. And the more you return, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, gratitude is no longer a practice. It becomes your way of being, your mindset, your strength, your quiet guide forward. Chapter 9. Express your emotions honestly and without fear. Being honest about how you feel doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It allows you to release the pressure of pretending, the weight of holding in what needs to come out, and the exhausting habit of filtering your truth to protect the comfort of others. When you give yourself permission to express your emotions, you reconnect with a part of yourself that has too often been silenced. Not every emotion is easy to share, but every emotion you suppress grows heavier over time. And when your feelings aren't acknowledged, they don't disappear, they simply resurface in other ways, through tension in the body, distance in relationships, and restlessness in your mind. The fear of being judged can be paralyzing. It can convince you to keep your thoughts locked away, to only speak when it's safe, to only cry when no one is watching. But silence can become a cage, and eventually that cage shrinks your sense of self. You start believing that your emotions are too much, that your needs are inconvenient, that your truth doesn't deserve space, and the longer you hold that belief, the harder it becomes to remember how to speak freely. The path back to emotional honesty starts with small, intentional steps, moments where you choose to say what you feel without apology, without hiding behind a smile, without editing yourself to fit in. Being emotionally honest doesn't mean dumping your feelings without care. It means taking the time to understand what you feel, why you feel it, and what it means to share it in a way that's true to you. It means expressing yourself with clarity, not aggression, with depth, not drama. It means owning your experience without expecting others to fix it. Emotional honesty is not about control, it's about connection, and real connection can only grow when both people feel safe to show up as they are, not as they think they should be. If you've spent years avoiding confrontation, you may struggle to say what's really on your heart. You may default to people-pleasing, conflict avoidance, or keeping the peace at all costs. But peace that comes from self-abandonment is not real peace. It's quiet resentment, it's buried needs, it's disconnection in disguise, and eventually it shows up in frustration you can't explain, in emotional fatigue you can't shake, in relationships that feel hollow. The cure isn't more silence. The cure is courageous truth, spoken from a place of self-respect. You're allowed to say, "This matters to me." You're allowed to say, "I'm not okay with that." You're allowed to say, "I need some space," or "That hurt me," or "I care about this too much to keep it inside." Some emotions feel messy. They come with guilt, shame, confusion, or grief. But messiness is part of being human. You don't need to have perfect clarity to start sharing what's inside. You just need to be honest about where you are. You don't have to make your feelings neat and tidy before you speak them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "I don't fully understand this yet, but I know it's real." That kind of honesty creates room for growth. It builds emotional strength, not by suppressing discomfort, but by learning to carry it with compassion. When you express your emotions without fear, you stop betraying yourself to be accepted. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop performing peace while you suffer in silence. That shift gives you back your voice. It reminds you that you don't have to hide the parts of you that feel too tender, too sensitive, or too vulnerable. You begin to understand that your feelings are not a burden, they're a signal, they carry wisdom, they offer insight into what matters, what hurts, what you need, and what you're ready to release. Emotional honesty also deepens your ability to connect with others. When you show up authentically, you invite others to do the same. You create an environment where honesty is welcomed, not punished. And that kind of environment changes everything. It allows relationships to become real. You're no longer guessing how the other person feels. You're no longer dancing around discomfort. You're in a space where truth is respected, even when it's hard to hear. That kind of connection is rare, but it starts with you. When you model emotional integrity, you become a lighthouse for those who are learning to find their own voice. There may be moments where your honesty is misunderstood, where people react with defensiveness, denial, or withdrawal. That doesn't mean you were wrong to speak. It means they may not be ready to hear what you shared. Your job is not to manage their reaction. Your job is to honor your truth without diminishing it to maintain false harmony. Not everyone will have the capacity to hold space for your emotions, and that's okay. The right people won't punish you for being real. They'll lean in, they'll listen, they'll care more about understanding you than being comfortable. You can start small. Begin with a daily check-in. What am I feeling right now? Sit with the answer, even if it's uncomfortable. Notice where it shows up in your body. Then ask, is there someone I need to express this to? Or do I simply need to give myself permission to feel it fully? Sometimes expression doesn't require an audience. Sometimes it's just you naming what's real, breathing through it, and allowing it to pass without judgment. But other times, it means reaching out. It means writing a message. It means saying, I've been holding this in, and I need to share it now. You are not too emotional. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are a person with depth, and your feelings are valid. They don't need to be compared, minimized, or justified. They simply need to be honored. When you allow yourself to feel fully, you allow yourself to live fully. Numbing, avoiding, or pretending may offer short-term relief, but it comes at the cost of your emotional health. Long-term healing begins with truth, with unfiltered expression, with choosing to speak what your heart has been carrying. There is strength in softness, there is courage in vulnerability, and there is deep power in saying, this is how I feel, without wrapping it in shame. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't have to mask your needs. You don't have to pretend you're fine when you're not. Emotional freedom begins the moment you stop editing your truth to make others feel better. It begins when you finally choose to give your feelings a voice. As you practice this, you'll notice your confidence growing. You'll start to feel more in control, not because you're forcing your emotions, but because you're no longer afraid of them. You'll begin to trust yourself more, knowing you can handle what you feel and express it without falling apart. You'll find peace not in pretending everything is fine, but in being real with yourself and others. And that peace, the peace of being fully known, is what makes everything else feel lighter. When your emotions are no longer trapped inside, you create space for joy, clarity, connection, and healing to return. That is the quiet transformation that begins the moment you choose to speak your truth. Chapter 10. Commit to lifelong learning and emotional self-care. Growth never truly ends. It's a process that deepens over time, not something you arrive at once and for all. When you choose to stay open to learning, not just intellectually, but emotionally, you open the door to a different kind of transformation. You begin to realize that your patterns aren't fixed, your mindset isn't permanent, your history doesn't define your capacity to evolve. And the moment you see yourself as someone capable of expanding emotionally, you stop fearing your flaws and start working with them. That's where emotional self-care begins, not in fixing yourself, but in understanding yourself more clearly, responding with gentleness, and practicing habits that strengthen your well-being from the inside out. Committing to lifelong learning means embracing your role as a student of life, not in a passive way, but in a conscious daily choice to notice your reactions, understand your inner world, and stretch beyond what feels familiar. Emotional growth is not something that happens by accident. It requires attention, it requires willingness, it requires you to pause before reacting, to question your assumptions, and to look beneath the surface of your behaviors. That pause is what allows wisdom to enter. That curiosity is what keeps you from getting stuck in loops of reactivity and regret. Taking care of your emotional health is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Just like the body needs sleep and nourishment, the mind and heart need space to breathe, to process, to be seen. If you've been conditioned to only push forward, to ignore your needs, or to wear strength like armor, emotional self-care may feel foreign at first. But strength doesn't come from denial, it comes from balance. From knowing when to push through and when to pull back, from being honest about what hurts, what's missing, and what needs healing. You can't outrun emotional exhaustion, you can only address it. The more you learn about your emotional patterns, the better equipped you become to navigate them. You begin to see the difference between feeling something and becoming it. You notice the way your body signals stress before your mind catches up. You recognize when an old wound is shaping a new fear. And instead of reacting impulsively, you respond with clarity. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the moment you decide to approach your emotions with curiosity instead of judgment. That change in perspective opens the path to growth that is both steady and sustainable. Emotional self-care doesn't always look like taking a day off or saying no to others. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to believe the critical voice in your head. Sometimes it's waking up and reminding yourself that you are allowed to make mistakes without being defined by them. It's allowing yourself to feel proud without needing external approval. It's creating rituals that bring you back to center, whether that's journaling, walking, reflecting, or simply being still long enough to listen to what's going on inside. You begin to make space for your emotional needs without shame, because you understand they matter. The journey of lifelong learning often leads you to places within yourself that you didn't know existed. You uncover beliefs that were never yours to begin with. You identify habits that once served you but now keep you stuck. You begin to distinguish between your authentic self and the roles you've played for survival. And slowly, as you let go of what no longer fits, you create room for new insight, new compassion, and new strength to emerge. That's the beauty of emotional growth. It allows you to become more of who you were meant to be, not by striving, but by unlearning and becoming. You don't have to wait for a crisis to begin tending to your emotional health. In fact, it's the daily, intentional practices that build the resilience you'll rely on when challenges arise. You learn to check in with yourself regularly, to notice the subtle shifts in mood, energy, and thought patterns. You become aware of the signs that you're reaching your limit, and instead of pushing past them, you choose to recalibrate. That awareness is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's what allows you to stay connected to yourself in a world that constantly pulls you away. You also start to build emotional boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. You stop feeding thoughts that drain you. You refuse to let your inner critic lead the conversation. You protect your mental space like something sacred, because you know that what you allow in shapes what you become. This kind of self-care is not about isolation, it's about intention. It's about choosing what supports your growth, what nurtures your peace, and what aligns with the version of yourself you're becoming. As you learn more about yourself, you naturally become more empathetic toward others. You start to see the pain behind the behavior. You realize that most people are doing the best they can with the awareness they have, and while that doesn't mean tolerating harm, it does mean leading with compassion. Emotional maturity is not about being emotionless, it's about holding space for your emotions and others without losing your center. That balance takes practice, and that practice requires patience. There's no final destination on this path. You'll always be uncovering new layers, learning new lessons, meeting new versions of yourself. But that's not something to fear, it's something to embrace, because with each layer you explore, you become freer. Freer from the patterns that held you back, freer from the fear that kept you small, freer from the need to prove your worth. And in that freedom, you find clarity. You begin to make decisions, not from urgency, but from alignment, not from fear, but but from purpose. You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not behind, you are learning. And every small step you take toward emotional clarity counts. It counts when you pause instead of reacting. It counts when you forgive yourself after falling short. It counts when you speak kindly to yourself in the mirror. These acts may seem simple, but over time they create deep change. They rewire your self-perception, they reshape your inner world, and they build a foundation of inner safety that no one else can give you. To commit to lifelong learning and emotional self-care is to say, I matter, my healing matters, my growth matters, and I am willing to show up for myself every day, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels slow, because the person I'm becoming is worth it. And every time I choose to take care of my inner world, I create a better outer world, not just for myself, but for everyone I encounter. That's the quiet revolution that begins with you, one honest step at a time.